And not all of your to-dos and tasks each week are equal, of course. Some are way more important than others, some aren't important at all, and others you should just stop pretending you're ever going to get around to doing. But today I'm going to give you a simple way to manage your to-do list so that you always have a successful and great week at your church. Hey there, it's Matthew Warner, and this is the Finding Uno Show. Welcome to the Finding Uno Show. Who's Uno? Oh, you know Uno. He's that one lost sheep the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after, and we are here to help you find him. I'm your host, Matthew Warner, joined by my co-host, Matthew Sewell. How's it going, Matt?
Pretty good. It's still the Easter season, so definitely can't complain.
Yeah, we just wrapped up Lent. How was your Lent? Was it successful?
I don't know. Is no comment an acceptable answer? No, I felt like I kind of slacked a little bit this Lent, but that's okay. There's always next year, right?
I'm sure God was successful in doing whatever he wanted to do with you, I hope.
Yes.
May not have been your plans, but his, yeah. Yeah, I just finished that the Exodus 90 thing. I'd never tried that before.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that. Yeah.
That was pretty intense, but it was really good. So it was 90 days instead of the normal 40 days, and lots of disciplines, fraternity, prayer, but it was really fruitful, really great. So I recommend that to folks. The Exodus 90, if you haven't tried that before, a good thing for men to do. I guess it's really just for men, but women can do the same thing. But it's a great group of guys to do that with.
Yeah, not a paid advertisement, but I have tried and stumbled through Exodus 90 in the past as well, but so I can also attest. Yeah, well, it's definitely worthwhile.
Cool. Well, I mean, this is coming out, in a couple of weeks, but so it's still Easter season, and we just finished up Lent here as we're recording this, but we hope you guys had a great Lent and Easter as well. Just a reminder, we love taking your questions on the show. We have our People Got Church Problems segment later in the show. If you'd like to be featured on there, don't be shy. Head on over to findinguno.com and you'll find our hotline there where you can submit your own questions, either recorded or written, and you might get featured on the show. So please do that if you get a few minutes or have something you'd like us to talk about or a question you'd like us to answer. Today, though, we are talking about what a lot of people have probably heard as the 80-20 rule. Matt, do you know what the technical name or the principle is that the 80-20 rule is based off of?
Yeah, what is it? The Pareto Principle, I think, right?
Yes, the Pareto Principle.
I don't know who Pareto is, but I know it's called the Pareto Principle.
we won't get into that today, but he came up with this way of expressing a pretty natural principle I think we experience all the time. And it's expressed more commonly probably as the 80-20 rule, but it essentially expresses that this disproportionality between causes and effects. So that, a majority of your effects or results that you get come from a minority of causes. So the 80-20 rule breaks it down that 80% of your effect comes from 20% of your causes. And so again, it's expressing this disproportionality between those things that just kind of naturally occurs in life. So you could think about it in a church perspective. You could realize this in 20% of your volunteers do 80% of the work, right? 20% of your members give you 80% of the complaints, right? They do 80% of the complaining. 20% of your kids give you 80% of the heartache. Okay, so this is just life, right? This is so 80% of the work that you need to do in whatever your job is going to come from 20% of your actions, is another kind of way to flip it around and look at it. And you can apply this to your to-do list. You can apply this in any of your goals that you have, but just it starts with this fundamental principle that 80% of the impact that you're going to have is going to come from 20% of your actions.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I always love thinking of things in terms of the 80-20 rule, because it bears out through everything. So then do you have practical and easy advice for how somebody who works at a church can actually use this to their benefit then?
Yeah, a couple of easy ones come to mind. Oh, and by the way, this applies, we've talked about the 82%, we talked about the 7% that do most of the giving. This was the study done. It's actually worse than the 80-20 rule. It was the 7% rule, where 7% were doing 90% of the giving, 90% of the volunteering. So it's actually an even bigger disconnect there when it comes to the average church community to a lot of these things. But the point is not the specifically 80-20% exactly. It's just this disproportionality between them. But yeah, so practical advice. First, I would look at like, what are the things that are the most annoying to you, cause the most pain, the things you worry about the most. So when you identify what those are clearly, whether this is your personal life or in your work at your church, think about what the things are that cause you the most pain, the most annoyances, the most worries, and they're probably coming from a disproportionately small number of causes, so 20% of the causes, right? So identify what those annoyances are, those worries are, and then look at what the causes are and start there, right? So that would be one way to get a disproportionate impact to lessening your pain points, annoyances, worries with a minimal amount of work, focusing on which things are specifically causing the biggest amount of inconvenience in your work. Another easy way to do it is to look at like your to-do list. Okay, so if you write, I got 10 things I want to do today. Circle the 2 at the beginning of your day before you do any of them. Pick the 2 that are going to have the biggest impact. Pick the 2 because 2 of those things on your to-do list are going to have 80% of the success for the day, 80% of the impact or results that you're looking for, 80% of the value of your day is going to come from 2 of those things. Identify which those 2 are, circle those, and start with those, right? So even forget about the other 8, start with the 2. And the truth is like, if you get those right 2 things done, you'll get to the end of your day, and yeah, you might have had a lot of other stuff that you didn't get to, but you will say, I had a great day. I got those amazing 2 most important things done that had a huge impact on whatever it is I'm working on. And so that's it. Why don't we do this though? So like, because it sounds easy enough. Well, duh, I'll do the 2 things that make the most impact. They're often the harder things. They're often the things that require a little more, decision for me, or something I need to finally sort of like pull the trigger on to do something big that is going to have an impact. And so what do? We kind of work around the edges. Have you ever done this, Matt, where you're making a to-do list and you put something on the list just so you can cross it off?
No, never. What? I don't do that every single day. No, yeah, definitely. I mean, because it feels good to cross stuff off the list, right?
That's right. So we start to do that too, where we put these easy things on there, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it tricks ourselves into thinking we got something really that meaningful done, and we really just want the dopamine hit from like crossing something off, and then getting to the end. Because what we judge ourselves too much on is like, oh, well, I got 80% of my to-dos done today. But if you did the wrong 80%, and you left a couple of hard ones with the highest impact, you might have only gotten 20% of your results, because the 80-20 rule works the other way too. You can spend 80% of your time only fixing 20% of the problems. But we tend to kind of do that. And then we check our email in between each one, and we go to a meeting, and we set up, phone calls, and we go to lunch, and pretty soon the day is gone. We've kind of eaten around the edges of the most important big things that we need to do. And so it does take some courage to kind of face up to that. But if you said, I'm going to circle the 2 most important things that are going to have the biggest impact at the beginning of a day, and I'm not going to work on the other 8 until, even if they're little easy ones, I'm not going to touch those until I get these other 2 done. Again, there's a good chance you might get those 2 done today, actually. And if you can't get them done, you need to break your list down a little bit more, because you're setting yourself up for failure anyways. If you're putting too big a chunk of to-do list. But that's that's some different advice for when you're making a to-do list, is to make sure that it's realistic, and that you break it down into small enough chunks. So maybe it's your weekly to-do list. So you can apply this to anything. You could apply this to your goals this year as a church. Here's our 10 goals we have for our church this year. Well, we rarely get all of our goals done. We just don't. We usually think we can do more than we can. So which 2 of those goals are most important? Which 2 of those goals this year are going to have 80% of the impact on our community? And let's make sure and get those 2 done. Because if you get those 2 done, now you've got 80%. You've got 80% of the effect. And you could spend all your time getting the other 8 goals done, and maybe you only get 20% of the effect done at the end of the year in terms of the impact that you had. And you can say, well, I got 8 out of my 10 goals done, but you only got 20% of the impact you were shooting for. Would have been much better to have 2 out of your 10 goals done, but have 80% of the effect, 80% of the impact that you could have otherwise had.
As you're talking, it's reminded me. It was Warren Buffett, wasn't it, right? Who had some sort of rule for how to prioritize those goals and tasks, whether it was the daily to do or the weekly to do or the yearly for the whole church, right? Was it? It was him, right? Who had
Yeah,
the rule?
so there's a story out there that he tells. It's actually not, it's attributed to him, but I guess they said he didn't really say this, but whatever. There's how many things like that that are good wisdom, but weren't actually said by
Preach
the
the
person.
gospel when necessary. Use words.
That's right.
Right. That's
Not
another
St.
one of those. Yeah.
Francis. Yeah. So Warren Buffett is attributed to him this 25-5 rule, which is basically the same thing. It's an 80-20 rule in itself, 5 of the 25. But it tells this little story. He was talking to another leader. He says, write down your 25 goals in life, your 25 big goals that you have for your whole life. Write them down. And then he says, circle the most important 5 of them. So again, that's the most important 20%. Circle the most important 5 of those goals. And then he says, okay, now come up with a plan for how you're going to get those 5 done. Okay, so you're going to do this, you're going to do that. I'm going to make time here. I'm going to do this when I'm this old. Whatever the plan is, you make space, you put it on the calendar. You have a concrete, prioritized plan to get those 5 things done. And then he says, now what's your plan for the other 20? What's your plan to get the other 20 done? And he said, well, I guess I'll fit those in here and there in my free time. And, whenever I get time to work on them, I'll work on those things. And he says, no. He says, those other 20 are your do not do list. Like those are the things that you're going to attempt to try to fit in different places, but you actually don't have time for. And that the more you work on those other 20, the less likely you are to accomplish your most important 5 that you put down. And so it's kind of being realistic, again, recognizing that we think we can do way more than we can, and that actually if you just accomplish those 5, you would be so happy and content with your life, and you would feel so accomplished, and you would have such a big impact in the world or your family or whatever you're trying to do if you just got those 5 done. But what do? We do it with our New Year's resolutions every day, every year. We write down these goals, and it's like you've been writing down the same resolution for 10 years in a row. It's like, well, when are you going to accomplish it already? And it's because we tend to overestimate how much we can get done, and we tend to sort of eat around the edges of a lot of different things because it's kind of the easy thing to do what we feel like doing at the time, and we don't ever tackle those big things that are most meaningful, going to have the biggest impact. And so that's just another way you can kind of get really serious about the things you're going to do. Again, you could do the same thing at your church. Write down the 25 goals you have for your church in the next 10 years or 20 years or 100 years. Think big. What are those big things that when you get 50 years from now, you want to say, this is what we accomplished as a community? Circle the 5 most important 5 ones and then forget the other 20 and do those 5. And if you actually do those 5, you will change the world in a really significant way. And you will be much happier with the impact you've had. So that's just another sort of iteration of the 80-20 rule.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, that's a good place to cap it too. So that actually is a cap on season 2 of the Finding show. But of course, before we end, we like to go over and take a listener question. So we're going to pop over for our People Got Church Problems segment. All right. So our friend Charlene emailed in with this question this week, our last listener question of season 2. And Charlene asked, one of my biggest challenges with managing our church database is keeping all of our parishioner info accurate. It seems like I'm always running across misspelled names of people whose emails bounced or keep bouncing. It can be really frustrating. Will I ever have a perfect, quote unquote, church database?
Charlene, you will probably never have a perfect church database, and that's okay. Great question. Obviously a struggle a lot of church leaders have all the time because it can cause a lot of annoyances and pain points whenever you have outdated information in your database or you feel like it's just not reliable and that useful for you. So certainly it's important that we work hard and do what we can to get our databases as up to date as possible. it will never be perfect. And this is where you got to be careful, because I've seen this happen a lot, where a certain IT person has the goal of making this perfect, and they end up with like hardly anything in their database at all, because they've just closed it down so much and locked it down in terms of who can access it and what they can do. And, your members can't update anything, or it's not very user friendly, but hey, at least the data in it is perfect. So we have to step back and say the point of having a church is not to have a perfect database. That's not our goal. It's not the end, right? Having an up-to-date or reasonably up-to-date database is a means to another end. So it's a means to an end, typically, of building better relationships with your members. In some cases, there's legal requirements. We need to report giving. We need to send them a donation receipt, and how much for tax purposes and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's sacramental. Like, it is important that we have, these things right. These are really important documents or things to document. So, there's different varying degrees of how important some of this data is for different reasons. But ultimately, this is to, it's like the other question, which we'll tackle this on another show sometime too. It'll be a good one. But what does it mean to be a member of your community? What does it mean to be registered? Why is that important? What's our goal of all those kinds of things? So again, that's another question, but it's good to step back and say, what's the purpose of this database in the first place? Now, that said, there are tools that can help you keep it more up to date. And the more up to date it is, the more useful it is for you, because you can rely on the information and you can do some really powerful things with it. That's something we've added in. When we added Flocknote People as an add-on to Flocknote, this was something we wanted to totally do differently than any other database tool has done before. And the way we describe it is, most database tools are sort of database first. They started with the database. That was their purpose, was to have a database of information. And then they added on an interface for members to log in and change their information. Maybe they added in ways to communicate. Whereas Flocknote, we flip that totally around the other way, and we do it as a communications first approach. And that means you focus on having good, solid communications, which means you have a connection with the person, with the member of your community. And so when you have a communication line that's open, that they're using, where they're opening information, where they're receiving it on their phone in a text message or on an email, or an easy way, now you have an opportunity to do much better at giving, do much better at keeping data up to date that may be missing about those members. And again, for what purpose? Well, from Flocknote's perspective, it's building those relationships with people by communicating in smarter ways. So you can communicate more effectively if you have up-to-date information on people, because now when I have an announcement for the men's retreat, I'm not going to send it to all the women necessarily. I'm going to send it to the men, because that's who we're inviting. Or if we have a marriage couples retreat, I'm not going to send it to all the single people and the children. I'm going to send it to the married couples. So if you have that information, and that's what we've now made the ability to do within Flocknote, is to sort by that data and then be able to send just those people a message. Now your communication gets much more effective. Your open rates go up. You're not sending as much noise communication to people where they stop listening to you because it's just not for them all the time. So it is important. But that's one of the things I think we've been able to do at Flocknote in a unique way that no other place has, because we already started with a great communications platform. And then adding on top of that now makes your communicating that much better. But because you're communicating, you have the way you're regularly communicating already in your database, connected with your database natively. That's what people tell us all the time. They're like, our Flocknote database, well, we might have another tool that we're required to keep our member database up to date on. That's changing because they're looking at Flocknote and going, you know what? We have more people in Flocknote than we do in our main database, and it's more up to date with their latest information. And so some of the reasons for that is that, especially contact information, is that the church normally is only sending something out, once a week, maybe if it's a weekly newsletter, but that's kind of impersonal. So like the time you're reaching out to somebody to get a record on them or to get some of this information, and you're like, oh, this phone number's old or this email address is bouncing, it's not very often. But the individual ministries that those people are involved in, those people know right away. They're like, oh, you didn't get my message last week? Well, oh, your email address changed. What's your new one? Okay, it's in now. It's all up to date. And so when you have each of your ministries using Flocknote to communicate also, it all percolates up to your main database in the same way. So anyway, there's lots of reasons you can go in there why I think our solution to it is really unique and uniquely up to date in that way. And we say that like your data actually gets better with time. So our system will ask people every once in a while, hey, is this still your address? You know, at the bottom of emails, like your newsletter you send out each week, you can turn it on to where it will ask them, is this still up to date? Oh, we noticed you didn't enter this information in yet. Would you mind clicking here and adding it to your profile? So it's actually, your data gets better with time. Whereas every other database you put information in, the day you put the information in is the most up to date it's ever going to be. It's only going to get more stale and old. Whereas in Flocknote, it actually gathers more information and automatically updates it for you from the person. And so having a tool that your members regularly use and interact with, and it's easy for them to update their own data, is key to having up-to-date information. So anyway, there's a few thoughts for you as you try to navigate that. It's something, if we can help you with, please reach out to our happiness engineers at help@flocknote.com. They're happy to help you work through some of that. Even if it's working with another database system in some way, they have a lot of experience doing that.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Charlene. Matt and I will see you on the next season of the Finding Uno show. But there's one last thing before we put a cap on the season 2. We're going to kick it over to our friend Liz to find out where Uno is today.
Hey everyone! This week we're sharing a photo that's a little bit of a throwback, not too much, but this is Lewis, one of our developers here at Flocknote, with his son Sam, and we just love this photo of them in their matching Uno shirts. You gotta love a good father-son Uno donning duo. Does that rhyme? That definitely doesn't rhyme, but we love this photo. So thank you, Lewis, for sharing this with us and for letting us share it with the Finding Uno show crowd. Alrighty, so this is the end of season 2, which is crazy, kind of mind-blowing that we're already through 2 seasons, but we have so much exciting content planned for season 3. It'll be here before we know it, so stick with us. And in the meantime, we would love it if you could leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast, and send us an email at howdy@findinguno.com letting us know you left a review, and we will send you some Flocknote swag. That wraps it up for season 2. We will see you in season 3 on the Finding Uno show. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're so grateful for you. God bless.